Welcome back, guys. I trust you've been staying safe. Now, just a few days after going missing, the five crew members on board the missing submersible Titan have been confirmed dead in a catastrophic implosion by the US Coast Guard. Ocean Gate Expeditions CEO Stockton Rush, Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman Dawood, British billionaire Hamish Harding, and French adventurer Paul Henry Naglio were on board the Titan when it lost communications with a support ship less than 2 hours into a 4,000 meters dive to the Titanic shipwreck. Now, a remotely operated vehicle, an ROV, located pieces of the debris from the Titan on the seabed about 500 meters from the bow of the Titanic wreck on Thursday morning. The debris was analyzed and confirmed to belong to the Titan, and family members were informed that there had been no survivors in this catastrophe. The bodies of the five deceased crew members may never be found, unfortunately. Now, according to experts, this is incredibly unforgiving due to the environment down there on the seafloor, and the debris is consistent with the catastrophic implosion of the vessel. So, an Ocean Gate spokesperson went on to confirm that the five crew members had sadly been lost in a statement that it issued to one of the press stations. And it went on to say that these men were true explorers who shared a distinct spirit of adventure and a deep passion for exploring and protecting the world's oceans. So, this issue has been trending for a number of days. And unfortunate as this finding is, I think that there are some lessons that could be learned from it. We'll get there. Now, the Titan submersible vanished 105 minutes after launching from the Polar Prince icebreaker research ship about 900 miles off the coast of Cape Cod on Sunday morning. The Titan's twin communication systems, text and electronic pings, suddenly stopped communicating with the support vessel, and no further sign of life was detected until the catastrophe was discovered just some few hours ago. A sweeping search effort involving Canadian Boeing P-8 Poseidon and C-130 Hercules reconnaissance aircraft, 10 vessels, and underwater sonar buoys had been combing an area of the North Atlantic Ocean twice the size of Connecticut for several years. But still, there were slim hopes of finding survivors, and the hopes began to dwindle, and unfortunately, the hopes became shattered when the US Coast Guard revealed on Thursday morning that a debris field had been found near the Titanic shipwreck by a remote-operated vehicle searching for the missing Titan submersible. The US Coast Guard went on further to indicate that it had found 5 major pieces of debris, and that the ROV initially found a nose cone, a component found outside the pressure hull of the submersible. It then found a large debris field where a part of the submersible or the pressure hull was still intact. The robotic search crew then found a second debris field where the other end of the pressure hull was located. When asked whether survivors could have been found if the search and rescue mission reached the stricken sub area earlier, Admiral Morga repeated that the vessel had suffered a catastrophic implosion. Sonar devices deployed during the search mission had not picked up any signs of an explosion. It was too soon to say whether there would be a criminal investigation into the loss of life, he went on to add. Now, it's important to note that the search teams had been racing to find the Titan before a 96-hour deadline passed on Thursday morning, when the vessel's oxygen reserves were expected to extinguish. So reports had it that the vessel carried oxygen that was to last for about 4 days. So it was a race against time when the vessel couldn't be found. Now, an Ocean Gate spokesperson also told one of the media houses that this was an extremely sad time for their dedicated employees who are also exhausted and grieving deeply over the loss. But let's move on to the key details about this whole issue. There are reports that this is not the first dive that has been done by the submersible, and actually there have been several dives done by this submersible. And the Titan had 7 onboard mechanisms to resurface in the event of an emergency. So it's not like there was no sort of plan B in place. They had 7 onboard mechanisms to resurface in the event of an emergency. Now, these included thrusters, an air inflatable air bladder, and drop weights of sandbags and lead pipes that would fall off in the event of an emergency and bring the vessel up to the surface using buoyancy. If the crew was incapacitated, hooks holding the sandbags were designed to dissolve in seawater, allowing the vessel to rise to the surface. It's unclear if any of these safety measures were activated because, if they were, maybe there would have been a fighting chance. But then it still begs further questions. 2 of the missing crew members, Mr. Harding and Mr. Najule, are members of the Explorer Club, and they have been at this type of things for several years. So this is not something that was new to them, like I said. And it turns out that this is not even the first dive that has happened. But then also, per the reports out there, before the trip is embarked on, people who are seeking to participate in this type of dive are informed of the risks thereof. Ocean Gate is a private company that was founded by Stockton Rush and another person called Guillermo Solane in 2009. And since 2010, it has transported paying customers in commercial submersibles off the coast of California, in the Gulf of Mexico, and in the Atlantic Ocean. It was actually reported that for this particular trip that has been catastrophic, it was being reported allegedly that the cost of going for this trip was $250,000 per seat. Now, Rush realized during the come-up of his company that visiting shipwreck sites was a way to get media attention, and in 2016, the company transported customers to a shipwreck for the first time, utilizing their submersible Cyclops 1 to visit the Andrea Doria wreck site. Now, in 2019, Rush told Smithsonian Magazine that, I quote, "There is only one wreck that everyone knows. If you ask people to name something underwater, it's going to be sharks, whales, and of course, the Titanic." So this, I'm sure, was a hint as to the bigger dream that he had at the time. And Rush, I'm sure, made this statement in reference to the fact that until he makes that dive to the Titanic, he wouldn't really just retire on this type of dream that he's pursuing. Now, talking about the Titanic was a British ocean liner that sank in the North Atlantic, on the 15th of April 1912 after colliding with an iceberg. In 1985, the wreckage was discovered on the ocean floor around 400 nautical miles from the coast of Newfoundland. The wreck lies at a depth of about 3,810 meters. Now, Titan was a 5-person submersible vessel operated by Ocean Gate, and this was a 6.7 meter long or 22 feet vessel which was constructed from carbon fiber and titanium. The entire pressure vessel consisted of 2 titanium hemispheres, 2 matching titanium interface rings, and a 142 centimeter internal diameter with a 2.4 meter long carbon fiber wound cylinder. Now, the Titan's steering controls strangely consisted of a Logitech GF710, which is a wireless game controller with modified analog sticks. It would move up to 3 knots using 4 electric thrusters, arrayed 2 horizontal and 2 vertical. OceanGate claimed on its websites as of 2023 that the Titan was designed and engineered by OceanGate Incorporated in collaboration with experts from NASA, Boeing, and the University of Washington. There's more on this. Now, after the disappearance of the Titan in 2023, there was a claim that the APL had no involvement in design, engineering, or testing of the Titan submersible. A Boeing spokesperson also claimed Boeing was not a partner on the Titan and did not design or build it. Then, a NASA spokesperson said that NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center had a Space Act agreement with OceanGate, but did not conduct testing and manufacturing via its workforce or facilities. According to OceanGate, the vessel contained monitoring systems to continuously monitor the strength of the hull. The vessel had life support for 5 crew members for 96 hours. There was no onboard navigation system. The support ship, which monitored the position of Titan relative to its target, the Titanic, sent text messages to Titan, providing distances and directions. According to OceanGate, the Titan had 7 backup systems intended to return the vessel to surface in case of an emergency, and I've already explained this. Now, an OceanGate investor explained that if the vessel did not automatically ascend after the elapsed time, those inside the vessel could help release the ballast either by tilting the shipwreck back and forth to dislodge it by utilizing a pneumatic pump to loosen the weights. I know this may be technical, but these are all just to talk about the fact that some things were said which gave more credibility to the Titan, but some institutions that were referenced came out to clarify, and it seemed like people had believed certain things to an extent which might not have been the case to the fullest. Maybe there were some elements in there, but after the clarification, it turns out that some of the relationship or some of the collaboration didn't go as deep as was presumed. Now, talking about expeditions to the Titanic, the Titan made its first dive to the Titanic in July of 2021. It went on to make additional dives in 2022 and even in 2023. Each dive typically had a pilot, 3 paying passengers, and a guide on board. One of these people were inside the submersible. The hatch would be bolted shut and could only be reopened from the outside. The descent from the surface to the Titanic typically took 2 hours, with the full dive taking approximately 8 hours. Throughout the journey, the submersible was expected to emit a safety ping every 15 minutes to be monitored by the above water crew. The vessel and surface crew were also able to communicate via short text messages. Now, customers who traveled to the Titanic, with OceanGate referred to as mission specialists by the company, spent a whopping $250,000 to be involved in the 8-day expedition. I explained this already. But like I said, there is more to this, because it turns out that some safety and security concerns had been expressed. Now, because the Titan operated in international waters, it was not subject to any safety regulations. The vessel was not certified as seaworthy by any regulatory agency or third-party organization. Now, a reporter who had actually completed the expedition in 2022 stated that all passengers who entered the Titan had to sign a waiver confirming their knowledge that it is an experimental vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Another person, a television producer who had also completed the expedition, noted that the waiver mentioned death 3 times on one page. Now, a 2019 article published in a magazine referred to OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush as a daredevil inventor. In the article, Rush is described as having said the US Passenger Vessel Safety Act of 1993 needlessly prioritized passenger safety over commercial innovation. And in 2022 interview, Rush told a news agency, I quote, "At some point, safety just is pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed. Don't get in your car. Don't do anything." Quote closed. Now, I have a problem with this statement. When we talk about safety, we are not saying don't do anything or don't take any risk. There's something called a calculated risk. That's how come you have agencies who would have to certify certain things. It doesn't mean they don't want you to make any strides or make any moves, but it's just so human life, which is the most important thing, is protected. Advancements have still been made factoring in safety, so that is not to imply that if you want to stay safe, then stay in bed, don't get out of bed. I think that is just an arrogant statement, and per the outcome, although very unfortunate, it proves that some people who had complained about his antics or the neglect for safety were actually onto something. Now, in 2018, OceanGate's Director of Marine Operations composed a report documenting safety concerns he had about the Titan. In court documents, he said that he had urged the company to have the Titan assessed and certified by an agency, but OceanGate had declined to do so, citing an unwillingness to pay. He also said that the transparent viewport on its forward end was only certified to reach a depth of 1,300 meters, that is 4,300 feet, only a third of the depth required to reach the Titanic. So it means that they actually exceeded the limit of that part of the contraption. Now, he was also concerned that OceanGate wouldn't perform non-destructive testing on the vessel's hull before undertaking manned dives, and alleged that he was repeatedly told that no scan of the hull or bond line could be done to check for delaminations, porosity, and voids of sufficient adhesion of the glue being used due to the thickness of the hull. OceanGate said that this person who was talking about this was not an engineer. He had refused to accept safety approvals from OceanGate's engineering team, and that the company's evaluation of the Titan hull was stronger than any kind of third-party evaluation. OceanGate sued this person for allegedly breaching its confidentiality contract and making fraudulent statements. And this guy countersued, stating he had been wrongfully terminated as a whistleblower for bringing up concerns about the Titan's ability to operate safely. Now, a few months after this, the two parties settled. So these are just some of the concerns that had come up. And earlier incidents had also occurred, where at a point in time, the Titan had made 3 previous expeditions to the Titanic wreck site, the first of which was in July 2021, like I mentioned. In 2022, a reporter was on board the surface ship when Titan became lost and could not locate the Titanic during a dive. So this questioned the Titan's safety, and it went viral on social media after the submersible lost contact with its support ship in June 2023. So for me, it looks like there were signs out there for those who had safety in mind, who had security in mind, they could see it. But sometimes, depending on who you are talking to about safety or security measures, it becomes a difficult conversation because their perspectives are just not aligned. Now, in the report, this guy commented to Rush that it seems like this submersible has some elements of MacGyver jerry-riggedness. He noted a $30 Logitech F710 Bluetooth game controller with modified control sticks is used to steer and pitch the submersible, and that construction pipes were used as ballasts. So there were several issues, and it all came to a head on the 16th of June 2023 when the expedition to the Titanic departed from St. John's, Newfoundland, aboard the research and expedition ship called the MV Polar Prince. Now, the ship arrived at the dive site on 17th of June, and the dive operation began the following day, on Sunday, the 18th of June, at around 9:30 a.m. Now, let's pause here and do this analysis. We know the story of the Titanic, about how some rich and powerful people who were to make decisions on where the Titanic would steer, especially after they had been informed that there was an iceberg ahead, were so stubborn and adamant that they didn't heed the advice, and the ship ended sinking due to the crash into the iceberg. Some people are seeing a correlation between the Titanic sinking and the Titan being lost in 2023, where they believe that maybe the powers that be, who should have made decisions about the safety of the Titan, were also adamant and maybe stubborn, and that could have caused this. For now, I wouldn't say I agree with them because I know investigations are already ongoing. I don't know if there will be any form of criminal proceedings, but lives have been lost, and I know investigations will seek to conclude on what the root causes were and also who is to be held responsible or accountable for these root causes. And once that comes out, I'll let you know where I stand on this issue. Now, the people on board were 5 people. Shahzada Dawood, who is a Pakistani-British businessman of the Dawood Hercules Corporation and trustee at the SETI Institute. He was one of the wealthiest people in Pakistan. Then the next person was Suleiman Dawood, a 19-year-old son of Shahzada Dawood, a student at the University of Strathclyde. The third person was Hamish Harden, who is also a British businessman, aviator, and space tourist. He had previously descended into the Mariana Trench, broken the Guinness World Record for a circumnavigation of the Earth and flown into space. So this guy has done it all. And then the next person was Paul-Henri Najolet, a former French Navy commander, a diver, a submersible pilot, member of the French Institute for Research and Exploitation of the Sea, and director of underwater research for EM Group and RMS Titanic, which owns salvage rights to the wreckage site. Then, the almighty Stockton Rush, who is an American submersible pilot and businessman who was the chief executive and founding member of Ocean Gates. So, at this point in time, when the disaster was looming, search and rescue engaged, they coordinated, but unfortunately, the end result was that they found debris of this submersible, and to the extent of this debris, these 5 people are feared dead, unfortunately. This case is still evolving, and my heart goes out to the families and the victims. I'm keeping my fingers crossed as we grieve I'm not going to blame anybody. I'm just waiting for what investigations will pull up, because for me, I believe that if there are root causes, then there should be people held accountable, especially since 5 lives have been lost. What do you think about this whole issue? Let me know what your views are in the comment section. Type an RIP to the families of these people, and we'll catch you next time. Stay safe out there.